And we begin tonight with just 39 days to go until Election Day, with early and absentee voting already underway in some states. And while Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are barnstorming the country, talking about what they call an opportunity economy and making things more affordable for Americans, including housing, food, and starting a business, Donald Trump has forced another issue into the center of the campaign, with a lot of help from right-wing media, including Fox. His running mates' admitted lies, the internet and social media, and conspiracy theories cooked up by literal white supremacists. That issue, of course, is immigration. Donald Trump knows he can't win the election based on the crappy job he did as president or his frankly crazy ideas for another administration, like spiking the cost of everything we buy through tariffs. So instead, he's going with fear of immigrants. Ironically, immigration is how modern America was built, right? Both during and after slavery. Someone had to replace all that free labor, and immigrants fit the bill. Most of us here today, unless you are indigenous American, come from a family of immigrants. And yet, there's always been resistance by the old immigrants to the new people. There was the Know Nothing Party of the 1850s, the America First Nazi Curious movement in the 1930s, and now we have Donald Trump, who has decided to make fear-mongering about immigration the center of his entire campaign, with fascistic rhetoric like promising the largest mass deportation operation in history and promising it would be a bloody story, spreading racist lies about immigrants eating people's pets, and even talking about giving immigrants serial numbers, Nazi style. At this point, his entire plan is trying to scare people into voting for him, despite 2 of his 3 wives being immigrants. And just to remind you, as we talk about this, border crossings are actually down to the lowest levels in 4 years. Violent crimes also way down across the country. And everything you hear on right-wing media to suggest otherwise is a lie. There is no migrant crime wave. Immigrants actually commit fewer crimes than people born in the U.S. They also don't eat pets. But the facts don't matter to Trump. Instead, he just keeps ramping up the rhetoric more and more every day. Here's what he said today at what was supposed to be a speech about the economy in Michigan.
These are killers. These are people at the highest level of killing that cut your throat, and they won't even think about it the next morning. A lot of gang members, they take their gangs off the street. Like in Caracas, Venezuela, the criminals have all been brought to the United States. She let our American sons and daughters be raped and murdered at the hands of vicious monsters. She let American communities be conquered. They're conquering your communities. We have to get them the hell out of our country because they're ruining the fabric of our country.
Okay, and then on the other side of this adjudicated sexual assaulter / rapist and 34-count felon, on the other side of that ironic dude, you have Vice President Kamala Harris, the daughter of 2 immigrants. Right now, she's in the swing state of Arizona, visiting the southern border for the first time since she became the Democratic nominee. Harris met with Border Patrol agents and will receive a briefing on efforts to curb the flow of fentanyl. You know, presidential stuff. Now compare that to Donald Trump's super awkward meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky earlier today. Later this hour, the VP will also speak on immigration, where she'll likely highlight her record prosecuting transnational gangs and drug traffickers as California Attorney General. She's also expected to go after Trump for killing the bipartisan border deal earlier this year just because he wanted to run on the issue. But despite all of this, recent polling has shown a majority of voters say they trust Trump more when it comes to dealing with the border. A man who doesn't know the difference between political asylum and an insane asylum, and whose plans to deport every immigrant, or anyone who just looks like an immigrant, would send our economy into a free fall. Because fear, whether real or irrational, can be an effective political tactic. The question now for America is, have we gotten to the point where we would destroy our own economy and walk willingly into a Hitlerian dictatorship because of the fear Donald Trump and his MAGA cronies are perpetuating solely for their own political benefit? Joining me now is Olivia Troy, a member of Republicans for Harris, who previously served as the Homeland Security and Counterterrorism Advisor to former Vice President Mike Pence. And Ray Suarez, host of the podcast On Shifting Ground, and author of We Are Home, Becoming American in the 21st Century, and oral history. An apt book, Ray Suarez. I am going to start with you because this is the irony of all of this, is that this is a country that wouldn't exist in its present form without immigrants. It certainly wouldn't without slavery, but set aside slavery. That's not immigration. After that, when the slaves were free, they still needed workers. So they went all around the world and they attracted people here literally to work because workers are what built the economy and what built the country. And yet each new group of immigrants says, ooh, we don't want those new people. Oh, gosh, we don't want them. You're even seeing that, Mr. Suarez, among some Latinos who also want to shut the border and kick people out and even mass deport them. Why is that?
But, you know, critically, Joy, part of this story is that the first century plus of immigration was almost solely from Europe. And then as American law changed in the 20th century, people started to come here from more places in the world. So that created a bifurcated, stratified immigrant population in this country where most of the new people are non-white, and most of the people with pictures of their grandparents and great-grandparents, sepia-toned photographs lovingly kept on mantelpieces, those people are almost exclusively European. And that sets up a difficult social change for us now as the new folks, 9 out of the 10 sending countries of people born in another place in the world are sending non-white immigrants to the United States. That's a really important part of understanding the unease we're having about this right now.
Yeah, and I mean, Olivia, during the Trump administration, when you were working in the administration, I mean, Jeff Sessions, when he was Attorney General, he is an open supporter of the 1927, I believe, Immigration Act, which essentially was, to Mr. Suarez's point, the goal of it was to shut down immigration from everywhere but Europe, was to say we don't even want Southern Europeans. They didn't even want Italians. They certainly didn't want Asians. They certainly didn't want Africans, North Africans, et cetera. The idea was to whiten immigration. And of course, it was Reagan who did the opposite. 3 million people given open amnesty by Ronald Reagan. And those people were largely non-white. They were largely Mexican migrants. So how do you square a party where Ronald Reagan did amnesty, where George Herbert Walker Bush was very open about saying we welcome immigration, we want immigrants, and where George W. Bush said the same and even made positive noises about Muslim and Arab immigration, to this?
Well, I think the fact of the matter is that Republican Party of the past is gone, Joy. I mean, that's the bottom line. What it is today is a complete fear-mongering, anti-immigrant sentiment. And, you know, you mentioned Jeff Sessions. That brought back a lot of memories of the immigration meetings I was in. I spent all 4 years of the Trump administration working the immigration portfolio, when we could spend hours talking about the things that I witnessed and the things that were said. And it wasn't Jeff Sessions, I'll be very clear, because just remember Stephen Miller was a big proponent of all these things. And so when I hear actually Donald Trump speaking the way he is this week, the way he has been the past couple of weeks, he actually sounds like Stephen Miller did in actual immigration policy meetings at the very highest levels. I'm talking about cabinet meetings, Joy, where traditionally you would not hear this type of language being spoken, but this is how he would speak. He would talk in this manner and he would enrage fear because that's the only thing he had, right? And then he would push these extreme policies. And so I think in the contrast here, when we're looking at this and the Republican Party of today under Donald Trump, which breaks my heart, right, as a lifelong Republican and as a daughter of a Mexican immigrant who believed in the Republican Party of the past, watching what is happening here is so just detrimental to who we are as a country. And it's also dangerous, as we're seeing with all the threats that we're seeing throughout the country when they push these messages out.
Right. And the reality is, Ray, that, you know, there was an attempt by Republicans. So a lot of this is an internal Republican struggle, because Democrats have always been for immigration reform and have always been like, we're ready. Whenever you are, we'll pass it. We will easily pass it. Republicans got together and negotiated a very, very conservative border patrol bill, a bill that would have, you know, largely closed the border. It was going to pass. Let me let you listen to what Republicans say happened to that bill.
So everybody who comes on this floor and says our border's broken, we should do something about it, you're absolutely right. And unfortunately, we didn't get there. President Trump opposed a Senate bill.
And then our nominee for president didn't seem want us to do anything at all.
After President Trump said don't fix anything during the presidential election, it's the single biggest issue during the election, don't resolve this, we'll resolve it next year. Quite a few of my colleagues backed up, looked for a reason to be able to shoot against it, and then walked away.
The fact that he would communicate to Republican senators and congresspeople that he doesn't want us to solve the border problem because he wants to blame Biden for it is really appalling.
And so if people are so exercised on the Republican side, it's really Republicans who are mostly exercised about this, Ray, then why aren't they blaming Donald Trump for not having a border bill?
Well, they're implicitly blaming him. You just heard, after all, the leader of Republicans in the Senate acknowledge the former president's opposition to the bill.
But I mean voters. I'm so sorry. I mean voters.
I mean, even Senator Langford from Oklahoma, one of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, was pretty mild in his assessment. He admitted that was what was happened. Donald Trump threw a monkey wrench in the gears, and that's just what happened. And life was supposed to move on. It's really something.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, Olivia, it is sort of, it's hard, I think, for people who probably watch this show and watch MSNBC to understand why voters look at Donald Trump and they look at the failures and they also look at the successes. Let me show you. Illegal border crossings fell in July. They're at the lowest level they are in 4 years. That's just a fact. And so the reality that people are seeing on Fox, this idea that immigrants are running through the country murdering people, it's just not true.